Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. All right, real quick before we get started on the show, I'm just going to talk about Treeline Academy. You've heard me say it. I can't even tell you how many times. Mark Livesey is treelineacademy.net. That's treelineacademy.net. Sign up. Use the promo code PC2020. Save yourself $20. Can't say it enough. It's awesome. Amazing. Most comprehensive e-scouting course out there. Check it out for yourself. Sign up. Use promo code PC2020. And now let's get to the show. All right, so I'm sitting here and I'm talking to Austin Lester. And Austin, I'm going to go ahead and just ask you to introduce yourself, man.
What's up, guys? Austin Lester, like you said. So yeah, man, I'm a full-time videographer, photographer, media guy, and survival instructor for Fieldcraft Survival. I've been working for these guys a little over a year now. Started October of last year. And so I actually transitioned right out of the military into working with them. It's actually just probably the coolest company on the planet to work for, man.
I don't work for them, but I'll definitely second that. So let's start out because if people look you up on social media, they're going to see a name and it's not Austin Lester Media or anything like that. It's kind of cool because, I mean, it sounds badass, right? But so tell everybody what that is and how you actually came about to get that.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Savage Lester. So I get screwed with about it all the time just because the guys, they're always like, "Oh, you're not a savage," because I'm way too nice. But it actually it started way before Savage was really a thing. Like Savage today was Savage for me in high school, which is where I got the nickname. So I grew up in a really rural part of North Carolina, and a bunch of rednecks and hillbillies, and I love them all dearly. But I graduated with like 56 other people, right? So super small high school, but I was the only Native American kid that went to the school, and so everybody called me Savage, and I just rolled with it, right? Like I didn't care. I grew up with it. And like I went to class with the same kids I went to class with from like freaking kindergarten, like all the way up and through. So
that was
we knew each other really well. But, yeah,
I think my graduating class was one of the largest classes. I mean, now I'm sure that's changed quite a bit because the town's grown exponentially. But at the time, my graduating class was 100 kids. And most of those kids I knew all the way through grade school, all the way up. And now it's kind of weird because I don't know anybody when I go into that town. But
I know, man. That's the same way for me, man. It's so weird.
Yeah. But so let's kind of talk about, I mean, did you do much hunting or anything like that in your youth? Or was it like every once in a while? What was your style of hunting and stuff?
Yeah. So growing up in a really rural part of North Carolina, and I'm actually from, like, if you have ever seen the Andy Griffith show, the old black and white show about the sheriff. I'm from Mayberry, like literally Mayberry. They call it Mount Pilot in the show, but it's from Pilot Mountain. So I'm from about 40 minutes outside of town of Mount Airy, North Carolina. So, I mean, way out in the boonies. And, but yeah, the culture there is just, I mean, that's it. There's farmers, you can either go grow your corn or your tobacco, and, factory workers, a lot of blue collar people, and a lot of people relied on hunting, fishing, and foraging as literally just, it was the lifestyle, and so my dad, my family wasn't super into it. I had a few friends that were really into it, and actually the first week of hunting season, of deer season every year, whether it was rifle or archery, they actually just shut down school of high school for the first week because nobody showed up anyway. Everybody was out hunting. So I would go with my buddies, and I was never really like very in tune with what was going on. I just wanted to go because it was the thing to do. But I'll never forget like watching one of my buddies drop a whitetail with a bow and arrow, and I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like, how do you do that, man? And I watched him gut it and clean it, and I was just super intrigued. And even younger, I was in Boy Scouts, and I learned, like, the motto is be prepared, right? So you just you get super involved in a lifestyle of being outdoors and preparedness, and that's just a way of life out there and sustaining yourself. So definitely being surrounded by it made a huge impact on my life.
So let's talk about foraging a little bit then. I mean, are you into it now, or was it something that you were into as a kid, somewhat to maybe harvesting ginseng, or I mean, because I mean, you probably grew up in a super super diverse ecosystem to be able to fauna and flora. I mean, if you think about it, like there's a lot going on there in North Carolina.
There is, man, and so foraging. I never really understood the benefit to it. I didn't do a whole ton of it, but I had a lot of friends that were really, really into that, right? And that's where I picked up most of the things that I'm into. Is just guys I got along with in school. I noticed what they were into, and I was like, cool, yeah, I'll go do that. And I had one buddy of mine, Colin, growing up, and super knowledgeable kid, man. And I mean, I remember 15, 16 years old, he would take me out and teach me about different mushrooms and all kinds of stuff. He would take me out and we'd forage a whole bunch. We'd take them back, and knowing what I know about mushrooms now, which isn't a whole lot, but a lot more than I did then. I mean, that's super dangerous, right? Like you don't know what you're grabbing and eating.
Well,
So
if you
it
don't
was
know
a
what
lot of
you're eating,
trust.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So luckily I never got jacked up, but but yeah, there's a huge ecosystem there with a ton of different stuff.
So, do you do any like foraging now then for like the whole
So I
survival
haven't,
aspect, or
it's not really been my forte. I've done some of it, especially when I was in Washington State, where I lived there for a few years. There's a ton of foraging to do there. Huckleberries, I mean, wild strawberries, rose hips, stuff like that. And it's a lot more prominent there. Here in Utah, there's a ton to forage as well, but I just haven't. I've only been here for a few months, and it's been cold ever since I've
yeah,
been. So there hasn't been much for me to kind of get my wheels turning with it. But I definitely intend to hit that hard when spring, summer comes around.
yeah. I think that's definitely my next step is learning more like green plants. I I've kind of done it to where I found enough mushrooms in my area to where I'm comfortable with quite a few of them, but I'm still kind of at the point where it's like I can identify plants now, and I need to start learning to identify more of them, and then identify these other plants throughout the various growing stages. I think is like super important,
Yeah,
and so I plan
yeah,
on trying to do that for sure this coming year. So
yeah. That's one of the. I was just gonna say that's one of the tough things about foraging as a whole is a lot of people don't understand, or even in a book, right? Like if you take a book out to the woods and you're like, I think this is it, but I don't know. It depends on, like you said, what stage that plant is in, and being able to identify it early and then late in the season versus just right whenever it's best to be harvested is can be a little bit challenging. But I have multiple books where I would go out in the woods different times of the year, and actually it's weird that you bring that up because I have the book and I would go out and rose hips is a really good example. Like I'd find it early in the season and I'd break off a couple of the leaves, a couple of the, the stem and put it in the book. And I'd go back like a month later and do it again and then do it again another month or two later, just so I could see and kind of learn how it looked throughout the stage and throughout the process of it kind of growing and then dying off for the winter. So that helped me. That's just something that maybe you or anybody else could really do to
yeah,
help.
that's actually a pretty good idea. So, with your photography, let's I want to get into that a little bit because I mean, I saw you got a bunch of cool pictures on social media and stuff like that. And a lot of it is the Fieldcraft side and the training and stuff. But you recently went on an elk hunt along with the Eastman boys, which
Yeah.
probably pretty cool and definitely a learning experience.
Yeah.
So can you kind of like lead into that and talk about the experience that you had and kind of how it started out and everything went from there?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, uh, first off, thanks for the compliment, man. I appreciate that. But yeah, I've only been doing photography, videography for a little over a year now. I mean, I started like a month or two before I actually started working for Fieldcraft, doing it full time, which is crazy. Um, I was always artistic growing up and paint and draw and do all that artistic stuff. But um, I picked up a camera when I got home from a deployment and was just interested in learning and went to YouTube University and just figured it out and got hired a couple months later to do it full time. So I think I got super lucky and um, but yeah, so I'm really passionate about it, and I think that it's really a cool way to share knowledge through a cool picture, a cool video. So, but yeah, going out with the Eastmans, man, it was awesome. So Mike Glover's been, working with Fieldcraft Survival, working with the Eastmans, doing articles for their journal, and he's been doing that for like a year, mainly just kind of himself through his own, as Mike. And so the guys up there, Ike Eastman, Guy Eastman, and then Scott Reekers, who's their digital media kind of manager, have known Mike for a while, known about the company, and we've been trying to plan something. And then obviously COVID hit and it was this whole fiasco, but we had something scheduled, and he's like, well, Mike, Kevin, you guys come out and go on a hunt. And then Mike's like, well, hey, you're going to come film the whole thing. And I was like, all right. Well, a bunch of stuff came up with the company and it's just been growing like crazy. So Mike really couldn't step away from his CEO duties at the time. So I kind of got the opportunity to just kind of roll out there and link up with the guys. And we were supposed to go in on horseback and go up in this huge mountain and hunt up there for a tag that they had, that Scott Reekers had. And some weather rolled in the day that, we pulled in there, and the entire mountain got hit with damn near a blizzard. And he's like, so we can still go up there if you really want, or we can throw an audible, kind of link up with, they had a really good family friend of theirs named John Stovall, and he used to print their magazine for them kind of early on in the company, printed it for them for like 12 years. And then due to some corporate things with the printing company and them transitioning in their company, they had to switch to a different printer, but obviously remained friends with him for a long time. And so Johnny had been putting in for a tag, a bull tag in this one specific area near Cody, Wyoming for 12 years. And he finally drew the tag. And he's like, so let's go link up with him and we'll kind of document his experience. He's been out there for a couple of days now, but I think we can link up with him, film and document the process and kind of teach some lessons along the way. And so I got to talk to them about preparedness, survival aspect, and I got to learn a lot about the hunting big game process for them. So insane experience.
So I know you I've heard you talk about it, but as far as like the gear and the difference between like the military gear that you were issued for cold weather survival versus like hunting gear, I mean, they're leaps and bounds almost, isn't it? The difference.
Yeah. And, and that's something that I was really surprised by is like, so the gear that you can get as a civilian is, I mean, it's whatever you can afford, really. Like you can go buy the suit that guys, summit Everest in if you wanted. In the military, what was different is that it's kind of like what's the verbiage I want to use? Like whatever's best for the most amount of people at an affordable rate. So here's a jacket and pants and boots that have been worn by 10 guys before you. And yeah, there's a few holes. Yeah, you can just patch them up and you kind of just figure it out. But at the end of the day, it was like good gear that you learned to rely on, that you learned how to use. And what kind of caught me by surprise is that as I've been diving more and more into the hunting community, like a lot of hunters and people that spend any time in the backcountry, they aren't as prepared as I kind of thought that people would be. And I think that a lot of guys just kind of rely on their knowledge of doing it for years and years and years, or they're so used to the routine of how things work. And so they just kind of roll with it, which is, I think, what a majority of people do. But even being out there, the Eastman's guys gave me a bunch of really nice Sitka gear. And so I got to wear like that Gucci gear out in the field, and it made all the freaking difference, man, because it was cold.
So what are some of the things that you noticed that like aren't really bridging the gap for your traditional hunter that maybe they should look into as far as survival aspect or something like that, or knowledge?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say probably the number one priority is med. I've never seen or haven't met many people that carry any med supplies when they go out into the woods. And maybe a guy will be, a little ahead of the curve and carry a tourniquet, or he's got like a little boo-boo kit with some Band-Aids and stuff. But really, if educating yourself on what are common injuries for outdoorsmen, and you're like, if you just look at the nature of what you're doing, you're carrying a gun or an arrow, a bow with an arrow that sharp edge, or a really fast moving projectile that could hurt you. And statistically, you got to look at the things that can hurt you and that are the biggest, most likely things to hurt you, and prepare for those. So, carrying a tourniquet, carrying some hemostatic gauze. And hemostatic gauze is just a gauze that is kind of laced with a hemostatic agent, which is just a fancy word for a chemical that promotes the coagulation process of stopping the bleed. So carrying stuff like that, carrying like a SAM splint, so that way you can splint twisted ankles and long bone fractures, stuff like that, because that's where a lot of people get out there and get messed up. They have an 80, an accidental discharge, and shoot themselves, shoot a buddy, or stab an arrow in their leg, or there's all kinds of crazy stuff that can happen. And you got to think about that time in which an event happens, and how far you are in there, how long it's going to take to help to get into you, how long it may take you to get out. And being prepared, especially medically, is a huge consideration for a hunter.
Well, I think you'll be proud of me because this year, I guess it would be this past hunting season, I started carrying a
Yeah.
TQ, a tourniquet in my pack. So
Yeah. That's
being prepared
awesome, man.
for
That's a
that.
step.
Yeah. I mean, like when I go like out west or something like that, I've got a more extensive med kit than like what my whitetail hunting kit is, because obviously I'm not as deep, I'm not as far, but I definitely started carrying a tourniquet now and a few other little things. So I'm definitely going in the more of that direction, because I started thinking about it, and it's true, man. I mean, I think it was Glover that actually kind of made that like light bulb go off in my head, and I'm like, oh man, he's got a valid point. And then to even reinforce that, I was watching some footage of a guy named Corey Jacobson, and I believe it was Dave Brinker, and he was hunting with them.
Oh, yeah.
And he tripped and fell, and the arrow fell out of his quiver,
Yep.
and went right through
Right into his
through his
leg.
calf. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, and that's a prime example. And they didn't have probably what they needed, but they had enough between
No.
the three of them to improvise. So I mean,
Yeah.
they definitely made it happen, but it could have been definitely a lot worse if it would have hit something, a different artery or something like that. So
Absolutely, man.
yeah.
I kind of feel like I just got, I don't want to say lucky. I mean, I went to school and worked for EMS and became a medic and did that for a little while, but before even joining the military. So just having that background of knowledge for me has been super beneficial, obviously for all the hobbies and things that I enjoy doing. But it, and I think that the lay person, the average everyday Joe, they don't necessarily have that knowledge. So it's important to really like not only have the equipment, but to seek out the training and learn that stuff and find it out there, and not necessarily just relying on YouTube, or something like that to figure out what medical things you're going to do to yourself or someone else that could potentially save your life.
No, I think advanced like casualty care type class or something like that would super beneficial to anybody that's going to spend any extended period of time out there in the outdoors for sure. So did you end up giving all the guys at Eastman a tourniquet or what?
We did, yeah. So I went up there anticipating like bearing gifts of just friendship and like, hey, our company has all this stuff, so here we wanted to share it with you, but they weren't carrying it. So I'm like, dude, here, like, take this. So, but yeah, I mean, there's those dudes. There's just such a wealth of knowledge there, man, and it's insane. And I was really humbled that they even let me come out there, and I got to learn from them, and that they, hopefully, they listened to any of the, stuff I talked about survival preparedness wise. But so yeah, man, it was a great experience to have those guys.
So let's kind of get into the hunt then a little bit. So you guys pack in really, really deep, right? Like 10 miles deep or what?
So it's crazy. So we were at Cody. Their shop's just outside Cody, and then so we drove about an hour and some change outside Cody. Hit the top of it. I'm gonna be kind of vague, mainly because I don't know exactly.
Oh yeah, you don't want to that, and you don't want to give away their spot. So
yeah, I don't want to give away their spot, but so we hit the top of this dirt road where there's some, he's like, oh yeah, they used to, do all the oil and fracking and stuff out here, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And he's like, yeah, it's just up the road here. I was like, oh, this is a cool spot. Dude, we were on that road for like an hour and a half on a dirt road. We get back there and they had a trailer set up, like a camper RV style trailer. And then there was another big open area. So we set up a big teepee out in this open area. And he's like, yeah, so we'll bed down here and we'll set up camp and then we'll hit it hard in the morning. Well, again, we get in the truck from the campsite, drove almost another hour to the base of the mountains, hop out of the truck, get into their Polaris that they had parked, drive another hour up into the mountains past the wilderness line to get out where we're going to get out and then pack in, for a few miles. So we were freaking out there, but the actual pack in was probably, I don't want to sound too dramatic, but probably 4 to 5 miles, maybe a little less just because I was carrying weight. It felt like more, but I had it light. I was just carrying my camera gear and a little bit of survival preparedness stuff, but they were carrying, the rifles and all their own equipment. So
were you guys,
we were out there.
Were you guys staying overnight where you packed out, or you just like going back and forth every morning?
Yeah, we typically did out and backs. Even we would do kind of a morning session and an afternoon session. So we'd usually wake up, 4:30 in the morning, eat like a quick breakfast, and then roll out before the sun came up. And we'd usually be pulling in to kind of where we wanted to hike in. Just as the sun's starting to come up over the horizon, we'd hike in, and right as the sun was coming over, we'd usually be in our spot or close to it. And then if there wasn't anything, or we didn't get a good shot or didn't have a good shot or whatever, we'd just pack back out, go back to camp, and then either glass that afternoon, just off some other hilltops, kind of, because the area was really cool. It was a really unique area where there were some smaller like foothill mountain. I don't even want to call them foothills because we were probably at 10,000 feet, but some lower mountains, and then you could kind of glass a few miles away the hillsides and the south-facing slopes out in front of you, which was typically where we drive the Polaris back to and then be able to hunt those areas. And they knew the area really well, which made a huge difference.
So when you say that, you were saying you were glassing the south-facing slopes versus the north-facing slopes?
Yeah. So if you think about it wasn't specifically just the south-facing slope, right? But if you look at it, the north-facing slope, and it gets less sun compared to the south, and typically that's where the snow would kind of be melted off, and so they'll come out of that cold, snowier area to the more open areas to feed, and the elk and then as the sun, and the reason we would leave those areas kind of like late morning and go back is typically they don't like to be out in the open as it gets hotter and the snow starts to melt and the trees want to drip on them, so they'll go back into the colder areas where they're not going to be getting dripped on, and they'll bed down for the afternoon.
So that's pretty good. That's good intel to have then, because you always hear talk about, the north face. Not that they're only going to be on the north face, but that's where they like to bed down and, kind of stay in their cover is in the dark and all that. So that's good info, definitely. So when you guys set up and you would do your vantage point and stuff like that, how would you set up for glassing, and like why would you pick that spot versus, did you kind of learn all that stuff from them, or?
I did. Not. I don't want to say like I know everything, because I definitely do not. But I learned this. It was like drinking from a fire hose. There's just everything they said. There was so much weight and value to it, and I just tried to. I literally just kept my camera rolling so I could at least get it all on camera, or as much of it as I could, and retained as much as I could. But yeah, we would. The areas that we would set up to glass in the mornings or in the afternoons depended on kind of what had happened, and a lot of it depended on the last time we had spotted a herd or a couple of really good bulls that we were looking at. We'd kind of notice the direction that they were grazing and kind of make a game plan off of that. So if they're up in an area where we couldn't really get to them, we'd maybe the next morning just go up glass and kind of see where they're starting to move towards, watch them for a little while, and make a game plan to have a play on them that afternoon, and then vice versa. So where we were set up, we were actually able to, like I said, view out pretty far, and there was a ton of open space that they would feed and graze on. And it was crazy actually how noticeable they were in this specific area, just because of the openness and the colors and that time of the year with all the snow on the ground, and their coat being so bright on that snow. But we talked about how we'd break down the terrain glassing with binos versus a spotting scope, and because one thing that a lot of people don't realize that happens is you can burn your eyes out, like not physically like melt them out of your skull, but you'll burn out your ability for how your eyes will focus. Like if you put your thumb out in front of you and focus on your thumb and then look 5 or 10 feet beyond it, your field of vision changes and your focal point changes. And by doing that over and over and over, looking through your binos and straining your eyes, trying to see what's happening, you can tire out your eyes, and then it's going to affect you later on, especially if you're behind glass on your rifle to try to take a good shot on an animal. So we talked about using binos versus spotting scope. And if I'm going to use binos, I'm going to scan an area to kind of find what I'm looking for, and scanning the stuff that's kind of closer, that's more open, scanning that first, being really thorough, and then kind of following the terrain, if you will, with your eyes, and the way that you're glassing is really important. It just helps you be more thorough and cover as much of the area as you can, because you think looking at it with your naked eye, you can see like, oh, this will be easy for me to cover the whole thing. But then you look at it through a couple of tubes, and that kind of gets distorted, and you have to be very thorough, or you can overlook something. And then once you've found a herd, or maybe even a specific bull within a herd that you want to really look at, maybe if you want to see, hey, is this the quality of bull that I'm looking for, then I'll move to a spotting scope and actually kind of break down the animal a little bit.
No, that's definitely good. I think a good comparison to, especially if somebody hasn't spent that much time staring through glass, it would be like if you've ever been a kid playing video games and you played them for like 6 hours straight, and you get up and go into the kitchen to get a snack or something, and you can't even hardly see anything 10 feet in front of you. That's
that's actually a really good, accurate representation, because I mean, you sit up there to glass and I didn't even conceptualize how much you would glass, because just growing up on the East Coast and hunting for whitetail, you just don't hunt that same way. And but you're up there for hours at a time, searching and looking and constantly on your binos, your spotting scope. So it's definitely a real thing.
I never realized, how much glassing actually was entailed within the hunt. And same thing, coming from the Midwest, it's like all my shots are mostly within like 40 or 50 yards at the max, and sometimes you're in timber that you can't even see more than 20. So
exactly.
It's cool, but I definitely adapted some things, I'd say, from the West and brought them back, like even to the Midwest. And I know a lot of other guys do it too. So it's not like I came up with it or anything, but I was just like, man, this really works as far as always having your binos in a harness on your chest. You see some movement or what you think is a flick of an ear, and it's like 100 and something yards away. You can really, get that glass out and get a positive ID on it and try and, maybe get down, make a play, whatever. I think it's definitely become helpful as far as that goes. Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk about. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
That's a little bit of a lag. No, what I was going to say is something else that I thought was kind of funny is with it being as cold as it was, single digits, and even down into the negatives and early in the morning. But you want to try to sit in the truck. You try to drive as far out as you can, and then you want to sit in the Polaris where maybe you're at least close to the engine. You get a little bit of warmth. But guys will sit in their truck and they try to glass, and they're looking through a $2,000 pair of binos through a $250 windshield, and it's like I don't know why I can't get the clarity I want out of these binos. Like you got to get outside. And dude, if he hadn't have said that, I would have never thought of it like that. You know what I mean? Like I was like, but it's so warm in here, like I don't have to freeze. But you got to get out there and just suck it up if you want to get that good glassing in.
Well, there's a lot of guys I know that make a little fire and stuff, depending on where they're at, or if they'll go up and warm up by the fire, 15 minutes glass, and go back warm up. So there's all kinds of stuff that you learn, I guess, as you go and all that kind of stuff. But so what was your like shelter setup and all that kind of stuff like then?
So what we actually stayed in is we had I don't remember the name brand. I meant to look it up.
Was it like a teepee or
it was a teepee. It was a teepee. It was about probably a 15-foot diameter, 12 to 15 foot in diameter, and we got three cots in there, and it had an opening at the top, and we had about a 2 or 3 log um, fireplace that we could keep in there, and it was
Was
just a tiny little stove.
was it like a titanium stove? Super
It
lightweight.
was,
You had to
yeah.
like unpack it,
Super,
unroll it, and all that stuff.
yep,
Yeah. So
yep. So
what I'm
the whole teepee was in like a probably a 3 by 2, maybe a little bigger, just box. We rolled that out, opened it, set everything up, opened it all the way up, and then as we kind of opened it all the way up and we got everything ready to go, we put out all our cots, and then it was actually a really cool setup. And the only thing that sucked is somebody had to be on fire watch pretty much all night. We would rotate because the logs would just burn out in like 20 minutes, and then you'd freaking freeze if you didn't. So, but
no, that's
it
awesome.
was a really good setup.
I think that's so it didn't have a floor in it, right? It was like just a shelter type.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yep.
So I'm guessing it was either like a Kafaru or a Seek Outside. I'm gonna I'm gonna go out on a limb
Yeah.
there.
I cannot remember. He told me, and he was super proud of it, but I cannot remember what it was, man. But it was a
No,
badass setup.
no, that's cool. That's cool. It's probably super lightweight too, right? Like
Yeah,
decent.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally. Yeah, it's something that you could definitely pack in. I wouldn't suggest maybe on your back, but I mean, especially if you're packing on like horses or something like that, or you're not walking real far, you could totally do it.
Well, you don't. Yeah, you don't have to have a 15-foot one. I mean, they make actually like. So what's cool is like Seek Outside makes one that's like I think it's called like the Silex or something, and you can get like a 1-man or a 2-man, but it's totally enough for you and your gear. And then I've heard. I don't know if it's actually true or not, but you can talk to the owner and request that he put a stove jack, so it eliminates one of your doors on the tent, but you can get a stove jack in one of those little tiny little ones, and they even make them out of like Dyneema or
Wow.
so it's even lighter yet, the Cuban
Yeah.
material or whatever it's called. So like you really cut it, so then it's like down to, with your poles, it's down to like less than sub 3 pounds. It's like
Whoa.
it'd be like I think the shelter itself is like 14 ounces or something like that, and then I think your poles are what turns it into. I think one carbon fiber pole. I'm not sure what goes in the middle, and then you stake it out. But I mean, so total weight, you're like sub 3 pounds for sure. I'd say it's
Wow.
closer to 2. It's pretty neat. I've been eyeballing them pretty hard. That's why I kind of know so
Yeah.
much about them. But it's
Yeah.
just like I mean, that's a game changer. Anything like, and I've got buddies that served and stuff. And the thing they always tell me is like, ounces equal pounds, pounds are pain, man. How much are you going to put on your back before? And I mean, you got some guys which are like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. I just put in what I have to and I go and hike it. But yeah,
Mhm.
you say that, but it doesn't mean you don't have like some of the coolest and
Yeah.
best gear out there. Right. I mean,
Exactly.
so
Exactly, man. And I even think about it, and you take it a step further and thinking about what if I do twist an ankle? What if something dumb does happen? Like I don't want to have to sacrifice gear, dumping it out in the backcountry, just in the hopes of making a stretch back to a vehicle or somewhere safe. And but that's so true, man, because you feel tough when you start out on a hunt when you're packing it in, and by the end of it, you're like, oh, I'm kind of regretting all this.
yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that you're calorie deficient every day, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, it's awesome. It's crazy. It's definitely one of those type 2 that everybody talks about, type 2 type of fun, but
Mm.
something keeps calling me back. Like I mean, I'm putting in for like
Oh, I
3
know.
different tags this year, and if I don't get it, I have to get an over the counter tag and just
Yeah,
go because
absolutely.
I'm doing it. So
Yeah,
yeah, man, I
right
got to
there
get
with
out
you.
there. But so let's
Yeah.
kind of roll into a little bit about like the hunt. How did it end up going?
So, dude, Johnny was a trooper. So Johnny had just turned 60, um, and dude, he was out walking me in the backcountry back there. I'm not kidding, man. I'm not just saying that. Like the dude's a stud, and he was from Tennessee, and just a hillbilly, great dude, man, awesome guy. But um, dude, like, I mean, he'd been out there 2 days prior to us, and 4 days we went out and came back and out and came back, and a couple of times we made a play on a couple of different bulls, and one time we walked in a couple of miles, and As we kind of circled back around, coming back towards the road, tracking down, we were literally following the tracks from a bull that we had seen. Coming back closer to the road, another public hunter rolled up and spooked them, and they just ran right off. So, I mean, that happened a couple of different times. And even I think it was our second day out there, we made a play on a couple of bulls, get down, sneak down the hill, get all the way set up underneath this tree. And I mean, he's on glass. I mean, he's pulling the slack out of the trigger, and we get this gust of wind that comes from behind us. He goes down about 300 yards out in front of us where these bulls were, circled back and hit the bulls, and you just see them put their nose in the air, just turn around and take off running. So, especially as a shooter, man, that plays on your mind, like, oh, dang it, like, did I do something wrong? I should have done this. And, but dude, I mean, it just having that happen a couple of, 2, 3 different times, 4 different times for him, it's the mental game too. So, but dude, he was a trooper. And so we did that day in, day out. And then finally, our last day out, or we had one more day left before we were done. And we actually went back to the same spot we had gone on that second day, go all the way back down the hill, and the bulls were right in that same spot. We were literally set up almost in the exact shoot. Like, you could still see the marks in the snow from his shooting sticks the time before. And he sets back up right there, took a shot. It was 398 yards, right at 400 yards. And he shot it, and this bull just like stood still. Like, you didn't see any impact on the bull. He didn't react. And Ike was with him. He's like, dude, you missed, like, reload. And his little magazine, his rifle malfunctioned. So he's like,
Oh, no.
he's like, oh, damn it. Like, I can't get this out. Well, and then this bull just kind of staggers. And I mean, it just dropped, dude, like all 4 legs out, just fell over. So Johnny goes nuts. He's freaking out. He's like, dude, I just killed it. Well, then this thing stands back up, and he's like, oh, shit. So he's like trying to get back on his gun to get another shot of this thing. And it took a couple of steps and just tumbled down this hill, dude. And I mean, it tumbled like 800 yards. I mean, straight freaking down into this little ravine next to a river. Like, literally the worst possible place it could have gone.
That's typically how it goes with just about any animal I do. Except lately I've been getting kind of lucky, but I've had some like that before where it's like, why did you go to the water? Why do I got to drag you out of 2 foot of muck just to get you back?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So what was he on? Like, what kind of rifle was he using? And how far was it? I mean, was it a decent like distance, or was it just, I mean, was it pretty good?
Yeah. So he shot it was right at 400 yards. And he's from Tennessee, so he does a lot of whitetail, and he's done some mule deer out west. But he said prior to that, he'd never shot anything beyond like 100, 150 yards. So he was super nervous, super shook about actually having to take that shot. And if I recall, I think he shot with a 30-06. I'm pretty sure it was a 30-06. Because we had the discussion about 6.5 versus 30-aught, and but I'm pretty sure that's what he had shot with. But yeah, man, I mean, he thumped that bull, and they had some badass ammo from Hornady, and I can't remember what round it was, man. Dude, I took notes on all this and then left it at home just so
No,
I could remember
okay.
to tell you. But dude, it was, I mean, he thumped it, dude, one round. I mean, it stood up, but just dropped,
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I always kind of like wondered, 'cause I mean, you always think like, should I take a 270? Should I take a 300? I mean, I bought a 300 just so I could take it elk hunting, but do you really need it? Probably not. I mean, I can't think of the guy's name, but he's killed more North American big game and game all over the continent, even elephants, with the 270. So it's like shot placement is more important, I think, than actual, the shot of what caliber it is. But it's still, I bought it. I was like, man, I want to make sure it's down, whatever. I'd rather, but you know how that goes. That's kind of like buying a truck and slapping wheels on it, or
It is, man. And when I think about predators too, man, because like there's a bunch of grizzly out there. I think the statistics for this past year were, at least in that area of Wyoming, were 1 in 4 of the kills were being taken by grizzlies. So if you think about that statistically, how many hunters there are to how many kills there were for that to be that many bear, I mean, that's a lot. And it's a little bit, I mean, it was definitely in the back of my mind. I mean, there's a spot on a tree that we passed a couple of different times with some fresh claw marks from a grizzly, man. And I mean, I stand about 6 feet tall, and they were just a little bit over my head. So, that's a bear resting. It's probably an 8 or 9 foot tall bear. It's a big bear, and but you think about that stopping power for a predator, man. I like my odds.
So were you packing a pistol then for personal or what?
So I carried a 357 Magnum with me, and one of the other guys I was with had one, and dude, super super thankful to have it. I mean, we didn't have any run-ins, but it's just that feeling of being completely out
It's
there and
added
nothing.
assurance, man, for sure.
Oh, it is. I mean, I mean, realistically, maybe a bear gets through it, but dude, I'm gonna go down slinging some lead.
Were you carrying like hard cast bullets and everything too? Like,
Oh yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
that's a thing that a lot of people probably don't think about when they're like, oh yeah, I've got a 357 or a 44 Magnum or whatever, and they're carrying XTP hollow points or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like,
Something that's gonna hit the skull and
no, you want
shatter.
deep penetration, buddy. You
Yeah,
don't you don't
yeah,
want it to fragment before it gets through the fur.
yep,
But
yep.
that's something that you just always got to kind of try and educate when you can for sure about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but that's like I always want a 10 millimeter for taking out there just so I
Hmm.
got 20 fast rounds or whatever,
Yeah,
16
right.
fast ones. But um, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that'll come too. At least give me an excuse to buy one anyway, right?
Yeah, right.
But so yeah, so you guys didn't have any run-ins or anything like that. But I mean, it's kind of almost proof that the grizzly probably should be delisted from the Endangered Species Act for sure. When you've got that many
Oh, dude.
encounters and I mean, as long as it's done, sustainably, it's one of those things where it'll actually help the population because they'll be healthier. They won't be trying
Absolutely.
to fight.
That's
Um,
and that's something that so many people just don't understand, man. And I'm learning it too. Like I don't claim to know it all, but the whole conservation side of the house, man. So many people view hunting as this like sport, and sure, maybe that's part of it, but the conservation side is massive, man. It's huge, and even for predators, like you're saying about grizzly, man. It's just people just don't educate themselves before they speak out ignorantly about these topics.
no,
And
they see a,
um,
a Disney movie and wanna
yeah,
wanna relate
exactly.
actual wildlife. In fact, I just watched a video somebody posted, and it was two mule deer fighting, and they actually fought to the death. One of them did not get back
Wow.
up. He was breathing hard. He must have had a punctured lung or something, and he did
Mhm.
not get back up. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, that's real nature, not the nature that people
100%.
want to relate. And sometimes it's hard to convey that unless you actually show them something like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the more predators you have, you start affecting the actual like you can even affect like migratory patterns of these animals and really start affecting the population. More predators equals, less calves are going to survive, and you're going to have all these weird problems with herds, and people just don't even conceptualize it.
No. So let's kind of get into the pack out then. So that was your first elk that you saw being broke down. I mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of, it almost seems like a daunting, like in my head, because I've still actually never even broke one down either, but it's like, seems like a very daunting task versus a whitetail, which you can quarter up in,
Oh yeah.
a half hour or something.
Oh yeah, and luckily we had a lot of people. There were six of us, I think, six of us, and having that many people, um, yeah, I mean, it made a huge difference, and especially having that level of experience out there made all the difference. But it's definitely was a little of a intimidating process for me personally because, like you, I've never really done anything that large or even close to that size. So process is pretty much the same, right? But you just got to think about, if you're going to cape the animal and uncorking the head and things like that, and just doing it on just a bigger scale because there's so much more meat that can just be butchered and overlooked if you don't do it properly. Um, but I mean, the dudes were pros, and he had it quartered up. I want to say we were probably down there an hour, maybe hour and 15 minutes
That's not
tops,
too
and that was
bad.
with yeah, and that was with us filming. That was with him kind of teaching me and the whole process, right? So probably would have had it done even faster if we weren't doing all that. But it's pretty impressive how much meat comes off of an animal like that. We had close to 400 pounds by the time we were done. And this was I think this was a 360 or a 370 bull. So a good size Boone and Crockett scoring animal. So I mean, that's a lot of weight to carry out. But like I said, we had 6 guys, so it spread it out pretty evenly.
Were you surprised by the knives they were using? I'm guessing they were using something kind of smaller as far as, I mean,
It
was it
was.
something, was it
I
like a Tito or something?
they actually have their own blade that they made, the Eastman's crew, and it's a small interchangeable blade, um, with the handle, and I mean, it's a cool little system. But I was like you said, I was really surprised at the size of it. I mean, I grew up when my buddies would skin animals, and I would help quarter up an animal. I mean, you're doing it with like an old, somebody's old timer knife out of their pocket, and it is what it is. But I mean, when you have a good blade, and it makes a huge difference in all aspects of survival, or any practical application for a knife, even in a kitchen, right? Having a good blade is huge. And just the size of it was no more than, I think,
Yeah.
probably 3 inches. And I was
Yeah.
like,
That's like the one I use now. I think it's mine's 3.5. It's outdoor edge. It's the EDC outdoor edge. I mean,
oh,
some
cool.
guys I
Yeah.
guess use it for a pocket knife, but I use it as a hunting knife, and it's interchangeable blades. And then I've got a
Yep.
smaller one even for like out west. But I mean, when I first started like deer hunting and actually field dressing deer, I used to carry a K bar. Like I would I would take the K bar and I'd take the tip and hold it in my hand and slit up and cut the fur,
Yeah.
and then you could get in there with that, and then you actually slice the diaphragm and all that and separate it. But it was cool because I could take the K bar, I could take it and hit with my hand, which you probably shouldn't do, right?
Oh,
We all
yeah.
learned ergonomics now that you're not supposed to beat on things with your hands and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I could push that blade through the rib cage, split the rib cage open, and then
Wow.
actually take it and hack on both sides of the pelvic bone and be able to
Yeah.
pull the
Open it up.
intestines out. Like it worked. Like
No
is
kidding.
that the best choice? Is that the best way to be using that knife? There's a lot of things that come into play there, but I thought it was cool and pretty badass,
Yeah,
But
that is
realistically,
actually.
I mean, if you're going pretty deep or something like it's I mean, that's a heavy ass knife to be taken with you. So
Yeah.
needless to
It's a
say, I
lot of
don't do
blade.
that anymore. Yeah. But that was kind of how I used to do it, just because mostly for the cool factor, I would say. But as I've gotten older, I've learned cool factor isn't as good as practicality. So now I just carry a little tiny saw that's super lightweight and a little
Yeah.
Havalon or a outdoor edge. But yeah,
Yeah, and it made a huge difference with it being as cold as it was too. Because when he shot it and it fell, they went down, gutted it, pulled the back straps and the heart, and then came back to camp. And then the next morning, we all went in and got the rest of it out. But I mean, like I said, dropping down into near zero, below or just above, and you go down in there, and the meat was starting to freeze a little bit, and um, so that added a little bit of more time to the whole process, and also, the difficulty of trying to cut the hide and get into the meat when it's that cold, and then thinking about, cutting into the meat when your hands are frozen like that too. I mean, it's a process that a lot of people don't. I wasn't. I'll just say it. I wasn't prepared for the process
so
of all
when
that.
you guys did that, did you debone the meat or did you carry it out on the bone?
No, we carried it out on the bone, but we did cut the legs from the bottom joint down off, because I mean, there's really not a lot of purpose for them. There's not a lot you can do with them. But they actually have a really cool tradition that they took from a Native American friend, out there. And what it is when you cut those lower part of their legs off, you find a V in a tree, and you put all 4 of those legs into the V of that tree. And the thought was, and the tradition is that will grow another elk in the place of the one that you took, for the harvest for the next year. So kind of a cool Native American tradition out there. And so I thought that was really cool. But
So
we did
that's
cut
neat.
them off and knock
Yeah,
it out. Yeah.
that's something I never heard of before, but maybe I'll have to try and carry it on if I am
Yeah,
successful
for
this year
sure,
for
man.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so you guys did the pack out. What was that experience like? I'm sure you guys probably each had close to 100 pounds meat on your back or something like that, right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, so I wanted the full experience. I told them I wanted a hind quarter, and they gave it to me. So yeah, myself and another guy carried the hind quarters. I think it was Scott carried the other hind quarter, and then the two front quarters. But they guessed the hindquarters were around 95 pounds. Um, we never weighed them, so I don't know for sure. But from my experience carrying a pack on my back, I'd say they're probably being a little conservative with that guess. Um,
You always think that until you actually put it on the scale, though. I will say that.
that's true.
I
That's
mean, I
true.
I had a buddy, um, Marine, like super hoorah, like all the time, just
Yeah.
and he's gotten older and fatter and all these different things, and I'm like, dude, man, if you're going out west, you better start preparing for it. You better start rucking. You better get. No, I'm fine. I can get it. It's all mental. I can get through this. And I'm like, listen, you take blood pressure medication and all other kinds of things. Listen to me, please. So he's like, okay, fine. So we go and he puts a bag of rock salt and we go hiking pretty extensive trails, whatever we got. And he goes, man, oh, and he's huffing and puffing and sucking wind. And we only
Yeah.
went
Oh yeah.
we went like 2 miles, right? And I put 60 pounds of sand in my pack just because I was like I had to show him up and prove him heavy. And he puts weight in his, and it's a bag of rock salt. And he goes, "Oh, it's got to be like 60 pounds in here." We get out, and I pull the bag out, and it says 35 pounds. And I'm like, I go 60 pounds. It's
Oh,
35, bro. And he goes, "Oh, that's a wake up call, isn't it?" So then, like,
yeah.
he actually got it, and he started like actually carrying, and he'd do that, and he actually started hitting it pretty hard after that. And he was carrying his son, which was like I think a year and a half or something at the time, and
Oh
so
yeah.
he was carrying the kid and the pack with extra weight in it,
Yeah.
and
There you
going
go.
deep and far for a while before he went on his hunt. And he's like, man, that definitely helped. I'm glad you
Yeah.
you got me doing that. But it's just funny how
Yeah.
sometimes you think that, but realistically,
That's true,
it's
man.
so I'm not trying to take away from your story at all, but I'm just trying to bring a little bit of reality into it. Is that
No, you're
people
right, man.
often
You're right.
often overestimate the load, but and they even did. I saw something. They did an article, and they had like 2 or 3 elk they packed out, and everybody guessed the load. And then when they got back, they actually weighed the pack to see if they were accurate or not with the guesstimate. And I think they were like, it was like a 60% accuracy or something. So, I mean, I'm not saying
Wow.
you're not, but yeah, it was like a 60% accuracy of actual weight. So, but yeah, I
Well,
wought
either
doubt
way,
it
it
was
was
probably
humbling.
close and it felt like 100 pounds, right?
Oh, it felt like 200 pounds,
Yeah.
but and that first initial walkout, man, like I said, it fell down in this ravine. So part of it, I mean, was like a just about like a 50-degree angle getting up in this initial like couple 100 meters, 150 meters. And then after that, it was uphill for probably a half mile. And, I mean, literally, we had to go up that side of the mountain. We could have side hilled around, but it would have added a good distance to the walk. And so we walked that, quarter mile up the mountain, and which was brutal, which took up, an hour just getting up to the top of that. And but after that, we were able to side hill around and kind of pack out the last about 4 miles. And uh, it's, I mean, and you know this, but that experience of like, even though it sucks when you get through it and you get back, it just adds to the whole overall experience. So
Absolutely. So we're using trekking poles
I wasn't, no. The smart guys did, but I wasn't.
because you didn't have them, or you're just too stubborn at that point. That's
I had them, but I was trying to do the filming thing. So I had my camera, and I was like, I can either pick the trekking poles or the camera, and I picked the camera, and my back wasn't very happy with that decision.
Yeah, because I have totally learned that the whole trekking pole thing is, I mean, and I don't remember who, I think it might have been like Randy Newberg or somebody. He's like, it's like
Yeah,
4-wheel drive for your legs. And it's totally true. I mean,
yeah.
it makes a world of difference for sure. So you guys get back and you get all the stuff back and everything. And I mean, how was the haul out after that? I mean,
Oh
everybody
man, it
just took
was.
one load, or did you have to go
Yeah,
back
we
in?
no, we didn't have to go back in. And the night before, we actually did the pack out when they brought those back straps and the heart back. We had set up this big bonfire outside, and we were like, we're not gonna light it until we drop this bull. And we lit up the bonfire and cooked up the heart and the back strap. And dude, I don't know what it is, and then the next night after the pack out, we ate part of the tenderloin, man. And dude, I don't know what it is, but it just tastes that much better after you get, after a pack out.
Yeah, I honestly think elk meat tastes better than venison, like a whitetail or anything like that. I just something about it. It's got like a sweeter taste to it. And I mean, if you think about it, they're a grazer like cattle versus a
Yeah,
browser that's going to eat other stuff like that too. So, I mean, maybe
it's
that's
true.
why.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, elk meat is definitely by far, in my opinion, better
Oh
than
man,
whitetail. But
so good. And they even said the Eastman's guys were saying, if you really want the best meat, don't get an older bull. The bigger older bull probably is not as good as if you were to eat like a younger female. That's really where you're gonna get that tender meat. So just something to think
yeah, for sure. And plus, though, I mean, you got to imagine like the experience, the setting, everything is playing into the whole experience as far as the
about.
taste of that meat and everything
Oh,
too.
true,
So
for sure.
yeah, so that's pretty cool, man. What did you learn as far as like camera and filming and all that kind of stuff?
Oh man, that it was huge, and I aspire to do all things outdoors, and I mean that's where I live a large portion of my life, just doing any and every activity I can, and being able to carry a camera with me everywhere I go is super important to me, just because one, I love it, and two, I love educating people and being able to share that experience with people who either can't get out and go do those things just due to where they live or the nature of their lifestyle, and or the people that just can't get out to those locations, right? Somebody on the East Coast wants to see Utah, like, or wherever I'm at. I just want to share that experience. So, but going out, and I over prepared as far as camera equipment went. I took a ton of batteries with me. I took backup audio equipment. I took backup lenses. I actually had an extra camera body that I took with me just in case, and I carried it all in a seahorse case, and um, luckily it panned out, and I would just take the batteries, because a big thing is batteries will get cold soaked. And what that means is just, if anybody that's had anything out that's battery powered in the cold, the batteries die a lot faster. So what I would do is I would take two spare batteries, and I'd put them on my innermost layer, or on my innermost jacket, and carry them close to my body to keep my body heat, to keep the temperature a little warmer, so they wouldn't die as fast. And so that worked really well. And I went through about a battery every day ish, a little less than, and I had ended up with. I said if everything went perfect, I'd use this equipment and this equipment alone, and it worked out just like that. Um, so a lot of it was just the planning, planning it out, having spares, all that kind of stuff. So it worked out really, really well, man. I didn't have any problems.
No, that's good. Did you learn anything about like the differences in shot angles or kind of
Totally.
stuff like that?
Yeah, a big part of filmmaking is the story, is telling the story, and I'm really new at this, but um, that's the most important thing to me, right? Like, I mean, there's tons of examples all over YouTube and the internet that of people making great videos with just a cell phone, but they tell the story, and it's something that people can relate to and something people enjoy. Um, the experience that they get from the video, and that was really my biggest goal with this whole video and putting it together. Was I wanted people to feel like they were there. I wanted them to get some of the lessons that were there to be learned, and kind of get some of the overall experience of the kind of the journey behind the whole thing, and the great parts of killing something and bringing it back and harvesting the meat, and then even the parts where it's like, you get set up and you don't get the shot, or you miss, or whatever, so but there's a whole experience there that so many people that don't hunt never get, and they don't even know how to dip their toes in that. And so I really wanted to bring that to somebody, for them to experience it, even if they never go on a hunt ever in their life.
I think what you said there is 100% true and needs to be brought to light more. And I've talked about it with a couple other people that do podcasts and stuff like that. But I mean, it's so true. A lot of times, all people see is like a grip and grin photo and the dead animal with a hunter, but they don't see the pain in somebody's face and the sweat on their brow from their calves burning as they just walked 3 miles with, like you said, 100-pound load on their back, or the
Yeah.
fact that it took them 5 days and, they lost like 5% body mass or something just trying to chase that animal through the mountains. I mean, so many things like that, or even the fact that they're sitting there glassing and the beautiful sun rises and the fog lifting off the mountain and things like that, that just they will never, ever, ever see.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing when people can actually bring that into a story. And I think we definitely need to do more of that, especially in, as a hunting community, educate people on the full experience versus just the dead animal or the stuff some idiots do on TikTok or whatever that, pose them with a dead animal in some stupid way or something. Because, I mean, like you said, just tie it all together and make it to where somebody's like, wow, that maybe I want to do that, or maybe I can talk to my neighbor about that versus hate them, or anything like that. I think that's definitely huge. So I think that's a good point to end it, man. That's awesome interview. Kind of awesome to hear your experience, especially coming from like a non-elk hunter and going out and kind of doing that and taking away your points, especially with people like the Eastmans, right? I mean, they've been doing it so long and definitely know the game. So I appreciate it, man. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and find your content and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for the experience coming on. It's been awesome. It's good talking about these experiences. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Savage Lester, LESTER, and working for Fieldcraft Survival, and find us at Fieldcraft Survival on Instagram as well. The whole video of the whole experience is on the Fieldcraft Survival YouTube channel. Just go on YouTube, type in Fieldcraft Survival, and the video is named A Hunter's Journey. So go on there and give it a watch. It's about 39 minutes, I believe, and just kind of tells the story and, like I said, the whole experience. So hopefully you guys can check it out and will enjoy it, and just give me your feedback.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing. We truly appreciate it, and take care, man.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. You too.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.